Hi, everybody. Very big welcome to each of you to this workshop. My name is Brian Newman, and I will be leading this presentation that you're watching today. I'm a Master Learning Facilitator residing in the Vancouver area of British Columbia. Over the years, I've had the pleasure of being involved in a number of Volleyball Canada coach education initiatives, and I'm excited to see Volleyball Canada offering online education options, starting with this workshop. As you're well aware, this is Volleyball Canada's first attempt at delivering this workshop and coach education materials in this format. With that in mind, you are very, very important to this project. Your observations, comments, feedback in relationship to the workshop will count greatly towards the evolution and final workshop structure. So please, when asked, take the time to provide your valuable feedback. Again, a big welcome, but more importantly, a big thank you in advance for pursuing your coach education and certification. Your commitment and dedication to continued education needs to be commended and is very much appreciated, especially by the athletes that you're going to interact with. You are in our community, you're keys in our community and supporting athlete development. So thank you again very much. Just remember, I believe this, coach education is a journey, it's not a destination. And you are continuing your journey starting today. Before we get into the workshop, it's important to acknowledge that within the NCCP and Volleyball Canada, we respect and acknowledge the First Nations, Indigenous, Inuit, and Métis people of Canada as the keepers of the territory upon which we will be learning today. All right, you are watching this module, then this is the first step in the development coach workshop. All right, you'll find the workshop is divided into separate but highly related modules. First module, this one, is the basics of the game, systems of play. The next module, and these are the order they're in, is biomechanics. They have evaluation of key volleyball skills. Then we get to maximizing practice and drill planning efficiency. And the last module will be next steps towards certification. The first three modules will have the video presentation. Then you'll have an assignment based on that presentation. And then you'll have a live interactive session. All right, we're going to concentrate on a couple of these in this workshop. Understanding on how to be safe and responsible coaches, we will deal with that tonight. Understanding the cycle of action and use strategies to foster rallies. Again, that will be discussed tonight. Working on Volleyball Canada's coaching mythology to a drill and practice, coming up in a later session. Design a practice plan that applies LTV and considers all the elements necessary to develop the whole athlete. That'll be touched on in probably all of the modules. And develop teaching and intervention skills. Again, that'll be recapped most likely in the last module. All right, let's get into safe sport. Safe sport is extremely important in our society today, and it's going to touch all of us. It doesn't matter if you're a coach, a manager, an administrator. It's important. So as of April 1st, all organizations are required to have training in abuse, harassment available to everybody under their immediate authority. So that's all of us. So all of us is mentioned within our various roles. This training is free. It's online through the NCCP Locker platform, and it's about 90 minutes in duration. It's important that you identify which role you're taking the workshop in. So coach, for example, administrator. It'll trigger a slightly different version of the training, but all of them are very good and very important. Besides being required, safe sport environments help make sport rewarding and enriching for all. By completing the safe sport training, you will gain the knowledge and skills to create a healthy and a safe environment by recognizing, addressing, and preventing maltreatment in sport. Let's move on to long-term development, okay? Some of you might have heard or been involved with the words LTAD. We're trying to get away from that and stick to long-term development and remove the athletic or athlete as the A in that. So it's important that we identify a few key concepts here because they'll relate to everything we do further in this workshop. What is LTD? It's long-term development in sport and physical activity. Okay, we're not going to do a workshop on it. We're going to emphasize, as I said, a few important points that will set this stage and get an understanding of the concept. So you will see a couple of slides on the subject. One thing that's really important, children learning skills and taking part in activities that match their stage of development, that is LTD. So why do we need the LTD model? Well, we have differences in development age, and quite often in the past, they were ignored, and we don't want to do that anymore. Human development from birth to adulthood is a continuous process. And so to understand this process better, experts have divided human development into distinct stages with specific characteristics. These are called stages of development. In Canadian sport, experts have identified 7 stages of development, each with its own physical, mental, emotional, and cognitive characteristics. This is our long-term development model, and it's the basis for the optimal training and competition kids need to enjoy sport the most and perform at their best. Why do we need it? Well, because participation in recreational sport and physical activity has been steadily declining, and physical education programs in schools are being marginalized. Okay, not a good concept. When you're considering the long-term development framework, we've got these key factors. We've got personnel factors, the individual, we've got the organizational factors. So there's sport-specific things, their physical activity. For example, gymnastics, we'd be doing things at a much different age than we do within the volleyball community. And the sports system as a whole, all right? Personal factors. They're particularly important for coaches to consider as they plan quality programs for young participants and athletes. These factors include physical literacy, quality environments, developmental age, sensitive periods, etc., etc. It's important to consider the whole participant when you're planning quality sports programs and the influence of personal factors on the individual sport. Volleyball Canada has identified 4 pillars in their athlete development framework to help coaches consider and plan for these personal factors. The pillars are technical/tactical, physical, psychological/mental skills, and life skills. These will be discussed a little bit in this module, but more specifically in Module 3 when we're doing the efficient planning practice. Specifically to this workshop, as coaches, you probably will spend a lot of time, and this workshop caters to the train-to-train stage of development. As you can see, this starts in early adolescence, males typically 12 to 16, females in 11 to 15-year-old age. Athletes at this point are starting to specialize in the sport of their choice. While children start competing more seriously, the major focus during competition is on applying what they've learned in training, not at winning at all costs. Athletes are starting to get serious about their sport choices. And let's be honest, the concept of winning becomes a bigger factor. I sit on the Domestic Development Committee, and certainly one of our guiding principles is athlete development and the stage of development that the athletes are in. We try to make rules that are appropriate for that particular age category. It's important to know this because it's critical for the development and retention of athletes. In this stage, it's where athletes are needed to support the athlete's continued development towards excellence or transfer onto ongoing activities for life. All right, let's get into the heart of the workshop here, the basics of the game, system of play. All right, let's get specific to game concepts. So volleyball is unique amongst net sports in that there's an expectation of consecutive contacts in a basic play. The rules say we have 3 contacts, and those contacts can be for a fraction of a second at the most, otherwise the rally ends. When we say expectation there, I'm not sure about that, but there is certainly a strong desire of 3 consecutive contacts. At the younger age, there's many ways to win a point without these contacts. This decreases as skills levels increase, but I would encourage younger athletes and coaches to train athletes for 3 contacts as often as possible. So in simple terms, the first contact when you're training anything in volleyball should be towards the net. The second contact along the net. That may come from a setter, it may come from another player. Finally, the third contact should be over the net. For your third contact to be good, the first 2 contacts must be well executed, and this means ball control. So in all your drills, execution, the first contact should be towards the net, the second along the net, the third over the net. I'm going to use beach, for example, okay, and compare it to indoors. So in beach, their first contact is to the net, just like indoors. But it's not the same spot, most likely, that we'd like it to be in indoors, because there's 6 of us on the indoor side of things. There's 2 on the court and on the beach side of things. The principles are the same, but our location might be slightly different. Things might be slightly different in your system, but the principles are still the same. If you're looking for ways to train this or an exciting 4-minute video on this, Ontario does a smash ball video, and I'd highly recommend you go to their website and have a look at that. Objectives. Again, in very simple terms, we want to put the ball on the opponent's court. On the flip side, we want to prevent our opponents from putting the ball on our court. Remember, volleyball is a skill-based sport. So technical and tactical skills combined with good cue reading, decision-making can compensate for athlete imbalance. I would strongly encourage you to simply discourage the idea of getting the ball over the net as a goal. Put the emphasis on ball control and multiple contacts to accomplish the basic objectives. Well, how do you do this? Put the ball on the opponent's floor and prevent the ball from landing on your side of the net through systems. We have offensive systems, we have defensive systems, and we're going to get into those in a little while. Offense. It's important to think of offense and defense in these ways and to make sure your athletes think of it the same. A team is on offense only when they have control of the ball. A team is on defense when they do not have control of the ball. Transition is when the ball is moving from one side to the other and neither team has control of the ball. And teams continually transition from offense to defense through the cycles of action. If you accept the above and think about this and emphasize it with your athletes, what is the act of serving? The act of serving is offense. We have the ball. The moment the ball leaves the athlete's hand and is served towards the net, we are now in transition, As soon as the other team touches the ball, we are now on defense. I apologize, this is a busy slide. It's a little bit hard to see, but it really lays out the cycle of action. I'm not going to go into it in too much detail now because we're going to see it a couple times later on in the presentation. In volleyball, we have these unique court positions. We call it a rotational order. Players must start in very specific positions relative to each other. Okay, once the ball is put in play, served, touch, etc., pairs, should be players, may move outside of this rotational order. These positions are determined according to the positions of the players' feet on the floor. So what does that look like? In this diagram, you see the numbering system. You've got players 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You notice the number goes in counterclockwise order. If you don't know why, the theory behind this is your serving order. So the player in the right back is your serving player. The next player that would serve on your side of the court would be the player that originally started in number 2. And that's why the numbering system goes backwards like that. In simple terms, and this is hard for young athletes, but position 1 must be behind position 2 and to the right of position 6. Player in position 1 has no relationship to the players in position 3, 4, or 5, only with 1 and 2. Position 2 must be in front of 1 and to the right of number 3. Same for them. They have no relationship to players number 4, 5, or 6. Position 3 must be in front of 6 and between 2 and 4. And again, you can go through all of those. Beach volleyball doesn't have the same rules. And I mention it only out of general interest, but if you've ever wondered why beach volleyball athletes only wear number 1 or number 2 on their jersey, that's their service order. It's not because that's the only numbers that the players like. Now, as I mentioned in the previous slide, the measurement of whether you're behind somebody, beside them, in front of them, etc., is determined by your foot position on the floor, not where your hands are or torso or any of those other things. Let's talk about system concepts and explain a few commonly used systems, especially for this stage of development. Systems. Like in other sports, the game of volleyball is more enjoyable and teams are more successful when an organized system of play is established for the athletes. Systems help us have fun, we have more success, and it helps us interact with our teammates. In simple terms, the definition, systems are methods of organizing a team's collective movements within games, within cycles of actions. Systems can be subdivided into our 3 categories that we talked about previously: offensive systems, defensive systems, and transition. Volleyball systems may be unspecialized or specialized. Unspecialized systems, that's where all players are expected to perform all of the roles required in volleyball. Typically in this type of system, tasks are assigned to a position on the court. So the athlete may pass, they may serve, they may set, they do everything. Specialized systems feature specific roles for some of the athletes. We may define who sets the ball, we may define who hits the ball, or which part of the court they hit it in. These could be court position, they could be skill-specific strengths. Again, I'm going to go back to my role with the Domestic Development Committee. So we develop resources, we set guidelines for athlete development, and a guiding principle is specialization and when to start. Typically, with younger kids, we try to discourage specialization. It's way too early. You never know what the athlete's going to look like. And it's really important that they become good all-round players. Clearly, as you get older, however, specialization becomes more important and more significant. Defensive principles of play. Purpose of a defensive system is to help prevent the other team from scoring points and to help you set up your own offense for scoring points. Reminder, you're on defense when you do not have control of the ball. Principles of defense apply to individual skills of service reception, digging, and blocking. So these are the aspects where, again, you do not have control of the ball. Service reception, I'm going to emphasize that a little bit. You know, we often think of it as an offensive thing. It can lead to offense, absolutely. But your basic position is a defensive action. You don't have the ball, you're not sure where it's going to, or who's going to receive it, or how it's going to come, because they haven't served it yet. Once that happens, you flip into transition, and then you'll shortly get into your offensive system. Another thing I like to emphasize in this workshop is the volleyball court is exceptionally large. It's 81 square meters of real estate, as I like to say, indoor, and 64 meters of real estate on the beach. You only have 6 players to cover it, and outside you only have 2 players to cover that. So you need to cover this space with the systems that you're designing for your defensive principles of play. Just keep that in mind. Here's another defensive cycle of action. So it took the first cycle of action slide that we had, cut it in half, and focuses on defense. This slide possibly is a little bit blurry on your screen. I apologize. It's cut and paste from our Foundation of Volleyball workbook, and it's a good diagram. It's a good snapshot, but it didn't transfer the best. But if you take it from the top, we serve. Immediately, we are on offense when we serve. As soon as the ball leaves the server's hands, we are now in transition, as it says there, and you see that first arrow moving towards the right side. As soon as the other team touches the ball, we are now on defense. And we are going to develop a blocking and defensive system. Our goal is to keep the ball off our side of the court, and we be in a position to dig the ball up to then prepare for an attack, have an attack, and have some attack coverage, and the rallies keep going. In your defensive systems, no matter which one you develop or use, all of your defensive systems will have several blockers. They'll have 1, 2, or 3, and they'll be at or near the net. And the backcourt will be evenly distributed to read and respond to the coming attack. If you're coaching 12U, 13U, 14U, you may not have blockers, you may not have 2-man blockers, you may not even jump. And that's dependent on the skill of your team, of the league you play in, et cetera, et cetera. However, you will have people that should be at or near the net. And if they don't jump, they will have defensive roles, but we'll call them blockers. Another point that is extremely important to emphasize is your ideal defensive position, or IDP. Your ideal defensive position will be based on the attack, the speed of the attack, that's common to your league. Okay, if your league doesn't have any attacking, you're working with 12U athletes, well then your ideal defensive position will reflect that. Commonly, and research will show that most balls at the younger ages, 12U, 13U, 14U, when they do come over the net, they come over the net and are most likely to land in the middle of the court. Your ideal defensive position may take that into account. Your ideal defensive position will change as soon as attacking or more options become available. Setters are able to back set. You've got attacking from both sides. As it mentions there, speed of the attack changes. You now have setters that can dump the ball over the net. You have setters that will set the middle. Probably within this age category, research will show that roughly 70% of the balls are always set to the left side, 20% to the middle, 10% to the right. That's changing a little bit with more emphasis going to the right. But again, that's a function of whether your setter can back set the ball. Your secondary defensive position is, once you're in your ideal defensive position, it's looking at the other side, seeing what they're doing, making decisions, and getting ready for your final defensive position. And it's primarily based on the quality of the initial pass. So if the other team passes a very good ball and has all kinds of attacking options, then your team probably will not move much from their ideal defensive position. If the other team doesn't pass the ball very well, the setter can't get to it, well, now your secondary defensive position will take a bigger role and will be probably slightly different than your initial defensive position. Finally, after the other team's second contact, you now know where the ball will go, you now know how fast it will get there, and you now know who and how you're going to get the ball over the net. They can set the ball, they can pass the ball, they can hit the ball. Once you've determined that, you'll have your team and you'll train your team to move to the final defensive position. And this is to prepare to stop the ball from landing on your side of the court based on where the attack is coming from on the other side. When you're establishing your ideal defensive position, and there's many out there, think of things in this perspective. Think of things and how fast the ball will come to you and come to your side of the net, and how it'll come to your side of the net. So if we serve the ball, the other team will pass the ball. And the absolutely first way the ball can come back to our side of the court is with a really bad pass, a shank we often call it, and the ball goes directly over the net. So our initial defensive position should take into account this possibility and allow all of our 6 players to dig up this kind of ball. The second opportunity for the ball to come to our side of the net is a pass that goes on the other side of the net, up to the net, and the setter or the player handling the second contact on the other side of the net dumps, tips, sets the ball over the net. You'll see this often, and you'll see it often in younger ages. We need to have our ideal defensive position to be able to dig up this ball. It's important that our ideal defensive position is established to help us with this, because we don't have a lot of time to move. These are quick actions. The third opportunity for the ball to come over the net is the other team setter sets the ball, and they attack the ball from a shorter set somewhere in the middle of the court. Again, we don't have the movement to move into a secondary defensive position and even into a final defensive position. So we need to have our initial defensive position take care of these balls if this is part of the offense that is involved in the leagues that you play in. Fourth opportunity from a speed and location perspective is a back set from the other team setter to their right front hitter. Why is that? Because it's typically a shorter distance from where the setter sets from the target that we tell our teams to be in to that player behind them, maybe 1/3 of the court as opposed to 2/3 in front. And finally, the last opportunity is a set to the left side, simply from a timing perspective. When the sets are higher or farther outside, we have more opportunities to go into a secondary defensive position, and we have more opportunities to get into a final defensive position. A couple of defensive systems that we're going to spend some time on: 6-up and 6-back defense. This is the 6-up defense, and you can tell, and they're named by the position, the initial position of the player that is playing in position 6. So that's the middle back player. So as you can see in this diagram, we have 3 players at the net, roughly spaced out, and our middle back player in position number 6 is in front of the other 2 players and roughly in the middle of the court. So this would be a 6-back defense. When would you use this system? Well, again, going back to one of my earlier comments, when the other team's offense, when the ball's coming from the other team, quite often land in the middle of the court. One way to handle this is simply put a person in the middle of the court on our side and prevent the ball from going or dropping on the floor in that area. It's a very good system. It's a very good system for starting out. There's many, many good reasons. It's typically a system that is used by coaches at the younger age categories. But it is a system that has a short lifespan or evolves into a 6-up system. And that's because males and female athletes are getting stronger. They're more capable of different attacking options, especially the perimeter of the court. And athletes are being trained and are able to move a little bit faster. Hence, this system is still used, but it's modified quite a bit. Or, as I mentioned, it has a shorter lifespan. This is a 6-back. We've just added it into this diagram. And you can see the player in position 6 is in the back. They're playing towards the back of the court. And now we've got the perimeters of the court covered. You see this quite often when blocking becomes a big part of your defense, because blocking needs to take away a part of the court. And when blocking takes away a part of the court, then we have the opportunity to play around the block and dig the balls. Hence, we got the perimeter part. With 6-up defense, you can see the big hole is right behind the player in position 6. So it's deep middle of the court. With a 6-back defense, you can see the weakness is the middle of the court. And again, that may or may not be an issue. It depends on what your blocking is able to do or to accomplish. Free ball defensive reception. Okay, free ball is an example of a final defensive position. Okay, which I remind you is a position arrived at once your team is determined the other team will not be able to attack the ball. So it's a great basic position that allows all areas of the court that the ball is expected to land in. So on the left, you see a W type of formation. It's very similar to a service reception pattern. It's got a lot of coverage. You have somebody in the middle of the court, where at younger ages, balls often land. As you get a little bit older, you see the saucer type formation. Again, you can have a saucer service reception pattern. The front middle stays out of the way because you'll have some kind of middle attack, and all the other players cover the area. Typically, you'll hear and you'll train your team to yell out free ball, and your team will shift into a free ball defensive position to cover this situation. Let's transition over into offensive principles of play. So the object of offense, as mentioned previous, is to score points or set up the defense for success by reducing the opponent's ability to build a successful offense. These principles apply to the individual skill of serving, setting, and attacking. Offense is generated off of transition from successful service, reception, or defense. Getting back to serving, it's important to have your athletes think and to train your athletes when serving, you're on offense. So try and make your athletes' serves meaningful. aggressive within your comfort level, the athlete's comfort level, because it is an offensive weapon. And the best way of putting a team and helping your defense out is by serving hard, tough, however that's defined for your program. Just an FYI, in working with our national team coaches, in very, very general comments, we are a very good country. We're ranked very well on the men's side and not too far behind on the women's side. But we are not one of the best serving teams in the world. We are currently ranked 6th or 7th, but we are not in the top 6 or 7 from a serving perspective. And that's a reflection on all of us. If we start thinking at a younger ages and encouraging our athletes to really concentrate, to develop great serving habits, to think of it as an offensive weapon, we can bridge this gap and move into the top programs in the world pretty quickly. However, on the other side of our discipline on the beach, we are arguably throughout the world known as one of the best serving countries. Our beach teams have trained and they understand the concept. And if you watch and if you see and if you talk to them, we use this to significantly help with our defensive responsibilities and allowing us to stop the other team from putting the ball in the ground. So it's kind of an interesting FYI that I thought I'd share with the group here. Back again to a potentially blurry cycle of action. This again is the main cycle of action cut in half, but with the emphasis on the offensive cycle. So you are receiving the serve, the ball is coming at you, you're in transition, but you're in a ready position to receive the serve. As soon as you touch the ball, you're now on offense. And your receiving position is designed to allow you to maximize your offense. Obviously, you need a good pass to do that. Once we pass the ball, we then move into preparation for attack. Our second contact sets up the attack. We go off to the right side of our little cycle of action there. We attack. At the same time, we have attack coverage. And then once the ball goes over the net, and the other team is either about to dig or is digging it, we transition to our defensive ready position. While the other team has the ball, we're in our ideal defensive position. We get ready to block, we're getting ready to play defense, and the cycle repeats itself. Specific to service reception, arguably, and I strongly believe this, service reception is one of the most, if not the most important aspect of the game of volleyball. We don't have a lot of rallies, and rallies are important, they're fun, and you win points at the end of a rally, but service reception really sets all of that up. When you're designing your service reception systems, consider the number of and the position of the passers. So at younger ages, you tend to see systems designed with more passers. That's typically because the players are less skilled. More passers means that the players cover less space. It means that they require less movement to get to where the balls may go. But it also means that they need to make more and probably faster decisions. As you move up with experience levels, or you decide in your context that you want to work with less passers, bear in mind that each player now has more responsibility to cover the court. It'll most likely mean you're going to have to train movement, and these players will have to have movement because you're going to have to move to cover their bigger and larger responsible areas. But on the flip side, they'll make fewer decisions. They will be competing less with other teammates because there's less of them in your service reception formation. A very basic general formation is the W formation. It's a very, very good initial system. It gets all players involved, as you can see by the outline here. You've got very good court coverage, especially when the serve is going to many different locations. You'll need to really emphasize communication. And just added into the chart here, you see we've divided the court up into zones. Each player has these zones and roles of responsibility. And again, it's important to train that. It's important to emphasize it. And usually when you have problems, it's players looking at each other, it's players saying things like yours, and you want to get away from that. You want to train communication. You want to train players to say mine and then go after the ball. And here is a very, very rough guideline as to how to define players' responsibilities. This will be based a little bit and will be adjusted a little bit depending on whether the other team serves from the right side of the court, their back middle, or their back left side of the court. And we'll need to adjust the angles of where our players are, but their roles and responsibilities in relationship to other players will not change a whole lot. You can see that you've got players taking short and others taking longer. And again, those are tough concepts to train. They require a lot of hours. And I found throughout the years, and I want to emphasize that the more people talk, the more they communicate, the more it's likely that there'll be less problems when a ball travels in an area where one or two players could compete for that particular ball. The saucer formation. Okay, again, we've eliminated essentially one player from passing. In this case, it's the middle front. I don't like those words, and I would use eliminate. I would just define their roles and responsibilities as a much smaller piece of the court. I know as you get up in levels, and I know certainly on the national team, that all players, no matter where they're standing, no matter how small their role and responsibility is in your service reception pattern, they do have a role. So in this case, your middle is up, and you have the saucer with players number 1, 6, 5, and 4, or at least the players standing in those positions. You've got good coverage. You've lessened the load there, and you've got players that now probably have better movement skills. And this is another good system that's fairly easy to learn and implement. Again, I keep emphasizing this, but you are on offense when you've gained control of the ball. All right, a reminder, we're on offense, and our job with our offensive system is to put the ball on our opponent's side of the court. So to develop offensive systems, it's really, really, really important to look at the development stage of our athletes. Again, look at the quality of our expected first contact. If our first contact is picture perfect all the time, well, then we're going to develop offensive systems accordingly. If we have younger ages, we're just learning the game, less skilled teams, then our offensive system will reflect that it's likely that the quality of our first pass is either not going to be consistent or not going to be consistently good all the time. Consistency of our base techniques. So what kind of environment are we in? Do we have setters that can set a multitude of different sets, different options? We have all kinds of attacking options, etc., etc. We need to think about player decision-making skills. And absolutely, we have to have the time to train all this and to adapt in a variety of situations. So again, and I've done this many, many times, I've looked at many different offensive systems, and I've looked at a cost benefit. What is the best bang for my buck? And that can change year to year, even within the same age category. Again, looking at all the factors that we've just outlined above. Let's look at a few offensive systems here. 6-6. I'm going to emphasize this, but I'm also going to caution you that there are a number of manuals. There is Volleyball Canada literature. There's old dinosaurs in the way of coaches that don't often use this system 6-6. They use the system, but they call it something different. They called it potentially a 4-2 or a 4-0. We want to get consistent. Volleyball Canada is working hard, and we will be emphasizing the 6-6 system. And when we have these numbering systems, the thing that's most important is the first number dictates the number of trained, potential, or specialized hitters. The second number dictates the number of trained and specialized setters. So when we say 6-6, we have 6 players on the court in indoor volleyball. So that implies that all players will have a setting role. All players will have a hitting role. And quite often it's designated by the location they stand and the position they are in the court. So for example, we could say every athlete that is in position 3 will be a setter. They can set the ball to any other athlete. Obviously, they only have 2 more players in the front row when we have some back row players. But it's not one athlete that's being specialized. As we rotate one position, we have a new setter, and that old setter becomes a hitter. So there's no specialization. A 6-3 system. We're now starting to get into a little bit of specialization. And you see there, with big emphasis, probably should have been bolded, 14-year programs. They get a gold star if you use this system. Please, if you're all coaching at this age category, do not immediately run out and do this. There's a time and place. But don't jump from a no specialized system to a 5-1 system, or I won't be happy with you. A 6-3 is a very good system. And now you're encouraging players to specialize in setting. And let's be honest, the setter's not made for everybody. It takes a mentality, it takes a skill set, and it takes a person that doesn't need all the glory all the time. Glory, we save that for the big hitters that do the big kill. So again, if we follow our theory, everybody's going to hit at some point in time. So we have no specialization there. That's why the first number is 6. And we're going to train 3 people to be setters. Typically, you see this when you have a penetrating setter, i.e. a system where the setter penetrates to the net as soon as the other team serves the ball. And now you have, which allows you to now have 3 hitters in the front row at all times. So where a lot of coaches will set this system up is in position 1 or position 6. You see that with penetrating setters. If you don't have the ability or haven't got to the point yet with your team to have a penetrating setter, then you would specialize in position 2 or 3. So, for example, if we have 6 people on the court and we have Let's say we're not using a penetrating setter, and when you are in position 2, you will set the ball, and every second player will be your setter. So the 3 people that you want to specialize will not start side by side. They will start, let's say, in position 2, position 4, and position 6. So the setter in position 2 will set in that rotation. Rallies are won and lost. You'll rotate 1 position. And now that setter is in position 3. They will set from there. Rallies are won and lost. They'll move to the back row now. Now they're in position 1. Now they will turn their attention to either service reception or something else. The next trained specialized setter will be in position 2. Now they become the main setter. And this repeats for all 3 people starting from when they first come to position 2. If your system has a back row setter, typically you see them specializing in position 1 or position 6. So I'm just going to go in position 6. We're going to say that our 3 setters will always start to set when they are in position 1 and 6. Okay, so I would typically start my setters using the system: 1 in position 1, 1 in position 3, 1 in position 5. Okay, so the person in position 1 is my main setter. Some rallies are won and lost. They now rotate to position 6. They are still my main setter. They will penetrate to the net from this position, and rallies will be won and lost. They will now rotate to position 5 on the court. They no longer become one of my main setters. They will assume other roles: service reception, passing, hitting, etc., etc. My next setter, my next specialized setter, will now be in position 1. They will assume the responsibilities of being my main setter. So they will set. Again, rallies will be won and lost, and they will move to position 6, and they will continue with this. And when they get to position 5, my third trained specialized setter will now be in position 1, and this cycle repeats itself. So it's a very, very good system. It is specialized, but it decreases the emphasis on specialization. It develops setters. Yet it still allows setters, who are often some of the better players, to hit as well. Moving along our specialization chart, we get to the next system, which is a 6-2 system. And this is where you have obviously more setter specialization. You definitely are working within an environment where your setters are now penetrating constantly and consistently from the back row. You place your setters opposite when they start in the court, so typically in 1 and position 4. And when your setter in position 1 is in the back row, they're the main setter. As soon as they rotate, after many rallies are won and lost, into the front row, they become a hitter, and then the setter opposite them will be the main setter, as they're now in position 1. And this repeats itself. You're starting to see this again in 15, 16U, and that's absolutely fine. We need the specialization, but certainly there's a role, a place, and a great opportunity, depending on the makeup of your team, to continue with the 6-3 specialization into these age categories as well. A 5-1 system is our final offensive system, and again, it's very, very specialized. So you have 5 people that do nothing but hit. They hit back row, front row, and everywhere they are in the court. And you have 1 person that becomes your full-time setter. And you see this at, again, as it says in the brackets there, say 17, 18U. You see it a lot in the high school system, and you certainly see it on the international stage. There's many, many good reasons for it. And the primary one is because people are so specialized, they become very good at their trade. Hitters are good at passing if they do that, and hitting for sure. And setters become very good at setting. The less setters you have, and setters all have different styles, different tendencies, different characteristics, different hand positions, etc., etc. It's easier for hitters to learn the tendencies and characteristics of one setter than it is of many setters. But please, please do not blast right to a 5-1 system at the 14 use stage, or we're going to have a conversation and you'll probably turn off a few of your athletes because they won't get to play a whole lot. This looks like a very complicated diagram. It's not meant to be that. It's meant to be a diagram and highlighting a very simple offensive system. Although pipe is in there, I would discourage you to forget about that at this point in time. Really, with your offensive systems, especially at the younger ages, you want to create a second contact that leads to a third contact. And ideally, you would like to create a contact that has a high ball in the forward position to the left side of the court as we look at the net, and a high ball in the right front court position, so a back set. You see the yellow shaded kind of gaps. Those are typically gaps based on where the other team's blockers typically might be for their defensive ready position. And so balls set outside on either side are great, especially at the younger age categories. I found, and you'll certainly see examples of it, that setters can set forward no problem, but they don't have the consistency to get it out to where that gap on the left side is. Sometimes the ball is set too far inside, occasionally it's too far out, but really we want to try and train them and get them consistent to have balls land in that gap. We want to do the same thing when we're introducing back setting. When you're starting to get more comfortable with it, we certainly don't want to discourage it, but I know from my coaching experiences, back sets tended to be shoot sets that went way out of bounds or come straight up and come straight down. So there is a happy medium, and again, we want to train and emphasize that high ball back. So if you take away anything from this diagram, that's what we want to do there. And as you see, it's a minimum of 2 gaps. Attack. Okay, eventually over time, eventually over training, you want to have something that includes some offense from the 3rd or 4th gap, which is really a ball immediately in front of a setter, a ball immediately behind the setter. And the first stages of that are probably like a medium set in the middle, a medium set behind the setter, and over time and over training, you will have a set that speeds up the tempo, a shorter set in those particular gaps. So when you're designing your offensive system, again, keep it simple, keep it high. Give the athletes the opportunity to have a good third contact and feel good about it and have a reasonable chance of success. Definitely evolve and make sure you have at least 2 options, and certainly encourage 3 or 4. I want to emphasize as well, don't encourage gaps 3 and 4 as the lazy way because your setter can't get the ball outside either forwards or backwards. Out of system offense. Really, this refers to the attacking situations where the quality of a pass or dig has limited the number of setting options available. Typically, the ball is set towards the ends of the net, so the last 2 meters on either side, those gaps that we saw in the previous slide. So out of system is, again, defined by the quality of the pass. So you can still have a decent pass where a setter can get to it, but it may not give you all the options. Some teams, some programs will call that out of system because, especially at the younger ages, it really limits the offense. However, at the older levels, if a setter can get to it, a setter's still got some options. So when you're thinking about out of system, it's really when a setter is not going to set the ball. And this will help us with some defensive actions. It will help us with how we train our athletes, etc. And you see bolded there, it's extremely important that every athlete develop the ability to effectively set out of system. If you look at international volleyball, there is a lot of out of system offense, especially when balls are hit that hard or hit to certain spots. We're just happy we dug it up. And when we dig it up, somebody's got to set it outside. So I certainly know at that level that they spend a lot of time with every athlete, not just the setters, being able to set out of system offense. And we should be the same, and we should not stop. Just because our passing becomes more consistent or our out of system offense is a small percentage, everybody should learn how to set within their specific roles and responsibilities. So my demands on my middle blocker, if I label somebody that, on the quality of their set, will probably be very different than what my setter demands are, because I'm spending time training my setter and their ball contacts are significantly more. It's a very, very general concept. Athletes setting out of system balls, the ball should go higher. The higher the ball, the better it is for athletes and attackers to be able to get to it and to make an attack out of the situation. The lower it is, the riskier the play. You're not really fooling anybody other than probably your team. So again, encourage your athletes, especially ones that aren't training as often in the setting area or the overhand passing area, to get the ball up, but try and make it in a very specific area. And I would keep the ball off the net. Now, as the age categories get higher, as your skill level gets better, we're still training this, but the ball could be slightly lower and the ball could be slightly closer to the net. But again, that's what you need to think. That's what you need to define for your particular league, your particular system, your particular team's capabilities. Getting back to our LTD train to train phase. So this is the phase that we're going to spend a lot of time in, the phase that this workshop's in. So this is a little bit of a diagram that helps us with putting everything together. So when we have young athletes, we'll call that our basic system. We're just learning. Our athletes are less skilled. We would typically spend a lot of time on that 6-6, no specialization. Again, we could become better skilled, we become more controlled in our actions and our skill execution, and we're getting better at things. We're going to move to more some of the other systems that we talked about. So the 6-3, the 6-2, the 5-1, and then certainly the vast majority of teams at the international stage, men and women, use a 5-1 system. So that's probably where we're going to end up over time. When it gets to service reception formations, we talked about the W formation. We didn't really get into the M formation, but certainly on the points of that are where we put players. These are great systems for basic service reception patterns. And again, there's not a lot of specialization. Everybody has a role, and everybody other than our one setter is part of our service reception formation. As we again get older, you're going to see service reception patterns start to move from 5-person systems to 4-person systems and to 3-person systems. In advanced, you see a lot of time spent on 3-person system, 2-person systems. Certainly at the international level, with the speed of some of the spin serves and that kind of thing, some teams are going back up to 4-person systems with the jump float serve, the movement of the ball. You're seeing a lot of teams move from 2-person systems to 3-person systems. So again, you need to pay attention to that, but please have the appropriate amount of people in your service receptions to match their ability, to help you create a good opportunity for success, to deal with your athletes' movement skills at that particular level. Defensive systems, these are interesting words. We haven't gone over them. I'm going to spend just a brief second on them. Spread block system. So a spread block system is, no matter how skilled we are, when you saw our basic court position, we have 3 people in the front row, and they're going to be standing at or near the net. With 12U, 13U, there's probably not a lot of blocking going on, but that's where their defensive system location will be. You can move that slightly. You can have them back off the net a little bit, but please don't have them back off the net if the other teams are running some kind of offense. So a spread block system is your 3 people in the front row are spread out. They're often a distance apart. When I coached my son's 13U team, we had a spread block system, and I just simply encouraged my left front person to stick their arm straight out to the side, and if they could touch the antenna, that's their ideal starting position for blocking. The same with the right front athlete. So as you can see, we're really, really spread out. The league I was playing at, the skill level of these players was not very good. We didn't have a whole lot of offense. I was quite fine with this. Now I gave them roles and responsibilities when the ball came in their area about whether to block, whether not to block, whether to dig tips, etc., but we were spread out. When you get to, again, more intermediate skills, again, you've got a spread block system, but you're going to now start getting into other systems. Bunch simply means that your 3 people in the front row, your 3 blockers, are bunched together. How close they are is by whatever definition you want to have. But they're certainly a lot closer, and they cover the middle of the court. These are great systems. Again, you see in advanced volleyball, when you start to have significant middle attacks, and you need to stop those, because in a priority order, those will be coming at you much quicker than balls set to the outside. The word read in there means simply your blockers will not block until the ball leaves the setter's hands. So whoever sets the second contact, once the ball leaves their hands, the blockers will read where it's going, how fast it's going to get there, and who's going to hit it, and then they'll move accordingly and go set up the block. So they will not anticipate, they will not jump early, they will read and react to the situation. So a little bit outside the scope of this workshop, but this slide, it's in there, and I thought I would share that with you. In a basic system, you might have 1 blocker. Rarely would I see 2. Wherever the ball is going to be attacked from, the person in the front row in that area, jump, put up a block, take away space. As you get more advanced, as your systems get more developed, your blocking moves from 1 person to a 2-person blocking system. And clearly in advanced, you'll try as often as you can to have a 2-person system, but if there's time and movement skills and abilities, then you'll move that to a 3-blocker system. When you get to defense here, we went over the 6 up. You see that a lot when we're starting out, basic system at the younger ages, the less experienced ages for sure. You start to get into a 6-back system, and that really carries through all the way up. And now what you're starting to see in the advanced levels is the basic ideal position that resembles a 6-back. But our starting positions are going to be modified slightly based on tendencies of our league, tendency of the other teams. Again, scouting plays a huge role in this, et cetera, et cetera. So it is a 6-back, but there's slight modifications. Again, I'm going to use example from my own personal experience when I was coaching my son's 13U team again. We used a 6 back system right from the start, but I really played around with it, and from a terminology perspective, it probably was called a 6-up. Was this person in position 6 as far forward as we saw in the diagrams earlier in this presentation? No, it was more like a straight line or very close to it. That's why I called it a 6-back, and that's why I modified it. But it was a very appropriate system, I felt, for the quality of the athlete that I had to coach with, again, their experience level and the leagues that we play in. Coverage, we didn't get into that too much. That's spike coverage, so we kind of have a 2-3 system. I'm not going to spend any time on that, but we have our hitter hitting, and then right behind them we have a couple athletes that are there should the ball get blocked, and behind them we have another row of 3 athletes. And you know, that doesn't vary a whole lot when you get into the intermediate stages or the advanced stages. It's just in advanced, the offenses are so much more you know, significant and faster that you don't often have time to move and see these 2-3s or 3-2 systems. But certainly part of our cycle of action needs to be trained. So this, the last 3 boxes there, the defender's coverage transitions, all of this needs to be trained regularly and steady, and part of your regular practice routine until it becomes habit forming. It seems I'm apologizing all the time, but this is another very busy slide. It might be a little bit difficult to see depending on the size of your screen. But it's putting both the offense, the defensive cycle of actions together, and now it's putting athletes on the floor. Briefly, let's start with the bottom box. You've got our ideal ready position. In this case, based on where player in position number 6 is, you have a 6-up ideal ready position. Okay, we serve the ball, we move and we get in our ideal ready position, and then we move to the left, the box to the left. So we're gathering information, we're not going anywhere, we're not doing anything. We're getting ready for the other team to do things. When we see the pass, we might move into our secondary position, but we might not. Again, it depends on the quality of the pass. When we get to the second contact being played by the other team, we'll now move into our final defensive position. So you see there a little bit of movement pattern. We've at some point gathered information and recognized that the ball is going to be hit from the other team's left front position. So you see that in the top left diagram. You see a block being formed, 2-man. We see our player in position 6 is really up, digging a lot of tips in this particular case. And you see other players playing defense around that. Then you cycle over. We managed to dig the ball up. We move into offense, and the next slide, which is the right front corner there, the ball is in. We've made a decision. It's going to be attacked out of our left front. The other team puts up a 2-man block there, and we have this little 2-3 coverage. We have the attack. We have the attack coverage there that I was describing in the previous slide, and you see it more laid out in the bottom right corner there. And now the ball has been attacked, it's going over the net, and now we're transitioning back to our ideal ready position, and the cycle repeats. Now at the top there, you can jump in off service reception and start the cycle up there, but we just started it from the bottom. So I'll leave that for you to digest. It's really important that we spend the time and we teach, we reinforce all of these systems, and that can be done in a variety of ways. So certainly, if your team is very young, very skilled, doesn't understand a lot of the volleyball concepts, it could be paper, it could be a playbook. I've been there, done that. Done a lot of catch and throw exercises. Put players on the court, have them wear some different jerseys so that they know where they are, throw a ball around and get that flow and the concepts of the flow. And then we progressed to individual drills. Drills that have one player going through multiple actions, different court positions, drills with a bunch of players, two or more, and we again go through court positioning, we go through the movements, and then we get into team transitions and things like that. All of these can easily be incorporated into warm-up sessions, can easily be trained more by incorporating them into warm-up sessions. So I leave that with you as food for thought. And then we get into transition drills. And transition drills, we can start off with easy balls coming in as part of our transition, and then we can progress once we're better at that, once we understand the transition roles properly, whether that be from offense to defense or defense to offense, and then we can up the success criteria or the nature of our drills, and eventually we'll get into controlled scrimmages or modified games that emphasize all of these activities. This is a great opportunity, a great time to introduce triple ball. Some of you may or may not have been exposed to triple ball. Triple ball is a very good concept. It's been adopted all across the country, and very specifically in the 13U category. You see it a little bit in the 14U category. You see the transition from triple ball in the 14 category into more volleyball game-like as we know it. But it's a great game. It helps providing more opportunities for rallies and attack balls. So quite often, serving or service reception breaks down. A drill breaks down the ability to have a rally, and triple ball takes that away and allows us to have rallies. So this is a competition format. It's great for athletes just learning the game and just getting excited about it. You can't hide in the corner. Everybody's got to be part of it. I emphasize the third bullet there, reduces early specialization. Apparently another spelling error that we'll correct. So it's really good for that kind of stuff. Triple ball helps standardize systems and a global skill development. So it actually is in a lot of provinces' rule books. You're not allowed to play anything other than triple ball up to a certain age category or a certain skill set. And really, it emphasizes 3 contacts. Just very simply, there's no serving, or you could have serve and play that rally out and then forget it. But typically, there's no serving. The ball is put into play by a toss from your own coach to a player on your team that is sitting or standing in position 6. Doesn't matter where they are in position 6, that's where the ball goes. And then you encourage 3 contacts. It's regular volleyball after that. 3 contacts are definitely emphasized. All players play the game. So when rallies are won, if your team doesn't lose the ball or does lose the ball, goes to the other team and then gains it back, the players rotate one position, and you label a position on your court where that player will come out and somebody on the sideline will go in. So for example, if it's when you get to position 1, you now rotate out, the next athlete rotates in, And you repeat this until all athletes get into the game, and you just keep cycling this. So it's a great game for getting players into the game. There's no substitutions. It's just one at a time. Players go in. It's also a great game. As mentioned, it reduces specialization because all players are playing position 1, position 6, position 5, 4, 3, 2, etc. Then they're subbed out, if in my example, and then you continue this. LTD competition guidelines. So this is a little bit of a busy chart here, but it kind of puts things in perspective. So from a game format perspective, years 1 and 2, that's kind of talking about players when they're first getting introduced to volleyball. We're seeing a bunch of 12-year-olds, especially on the female side, now certainly in some provinces, but 13, 14-year-olds. Triple ball. Triple ball is a primary game format. It's often required. Forget the fewer than 50% of the serves, etc., etc. It's just been adopted as a standard play. And when you get into athletes being having trained for a year or two, then they start to move into standard volleyball. When you get into position specialization, your system should encourage no specialization, especially when athletes are just starting out, first year program, second year program. You know, the specialization, if at all, will be extremely limited. As you start to get into years 3 and 4, you get into more training, they've been trained. Now you start to have specialization. You start to have very specific roles and responsibilities on defense. You start to get into some of those other offensive systems with 6-3, for example, 6-2, that kind of stuff. And in here, it's mentioned and highlighted no libero. So again, the Domestic Development Committee in Canada recognized that there's way too much specialization, and everybody needs to learn how to pass and dig at the younger levels. And we're finding that with the use of libero, coaches were doing a great job, but they're not doing a great job of training now. So yes, we'd like to have a libero in a game. Yes, it's part of the rules. In fact, now there's a rule that as you move up in ages, and certainly internationally, where you can have 2 liberos. And you've seen a little bit that. One is a specialized serve reception libero. The other one is a specialized digging libero. I'm not going to get into that, but you are becoming very, very specialized. We want to get away from that. As your athletes get a better skill, as your team gets older, your understanding of the game progresses, by all means, please move into that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that, but don't jump right from that at the 13U, 14U levels. Team systems, we talked about that. I don't need to go over that. We've got the various systems and the progression there. Roster size, this is a very interesting subject. Near and dear to my heart. Typically rosters are 12 players, which I find interesting. It's great size. You can have 6-on-6 competitions, no problem there. But certainly at the international level, roster sizes are now 14 players because you've got 2 liberos and things like that. But at the Olympics, you still are only allowed to take 12 players, things like that. When fair play competition rules came in, certainly in Canada, I looked at statistics as part of the Domestic Development Committee, and we saw a lot of teams that started with 12 players. And then after a year or two of fair play rules, which means everybody's got to play certain percentages of the games, team sizes dropped. And that's not a good thing. So we saw a lot of teams, 9-man teams, which did not make me very happy. However, it's not a totally bad news story. I looked at the number of teams, clearly dropped. But I looked at the number of individual athletes registering, and that remained the same. So the takeaway was that while the number of teams, the roster number on the team dropped, the number of teams increased. So that's okay. I'm okay with that. But 12 is not a bad number. 12, if you think about it for a game, unless you're into fair play rules or unless you're into triple ball, then yes, some players may or may not play. But there's much more than just that one game that that player sat out. If you're sitting out the whole season, that becomes a problem. So think about your roster size. And as you can see here, and what we're trying to emphasize is there's a lot of benefits to training with larger groups. Now, if you only have one court, that's a little bit more of a challenge. But you can certainly have two courts and you can train all the same thing. You can have larger groups. I'm seeing a lot of that in some of the clubs out there, and it's really, really, cool practice. And then you just split up for games and things like that. Playing time, again, we talked about fair play rules. If you're not familiar with those, Volleyball Canada has those on their website. You can certainly find them in your provincial organization. But basically, if you started one set, or if you did not start the first set, then you have to start the second set. And then anybody can start the third set, that kind of example. So specific rules, I'll let you research that on your own. But certainly as coaches, we need to balance providing playing time for all players and identifying roles for all competition. So for example, you are seeing some time where coaches and club philosophies or team philosophies say, you know what, everybody's going to play until we get to the provincial championships. And then we're going to cut it down, and not everybody will still play, but not equally. The first half of the season, the first 3 quarters of the season, people are going to play, and we're going to do our best to make sure that happens. But then when we get into some more meaningful competitions, we might change that a little bit. That's okay as long as it's spelled out and everybody understands your club philosophies, and you commit to certainly the fair play and everybody playing before that. So I leave that as food for thought with you. Competition levels, again, when you think about that, when you're just starting out, it's maybe within your team, maybe within your club, certainly within your city, that kind of stuff. As you start to get older, you start to get more experience. Now you're starting to move outside potentially of your city, certainly outside of your club, and you're going to provincial competitions, et cetera, et cetera. And then, of course, as you go up, you may get into definitely into provincial, but you certainly get into interprovincial competitions for sure. Next steps. Wow. We're essentially finished the module. But before we go, we need to do a little bit of a recap. And we'll get into that in a second. We're going to go over the assignment. We're going to talk a little bit about our next interactive sessions, that kind of stuff. And definitely at this time, I think it's a great time to remind you, before I forget, that I've given permission. My email address will be circulated. You're welcome to use it. So if you have any comments, questions, concerns that you would like to address between now and our next session, the next live session, don't hesitate to use that. If you certainly have questions, comments, or thoughts and want to save them for our live session, that's completely fine as well. If you're going to do that, please write them down so you don't forget, and make sure you bring them to our live session there. All right, what did we learn today? What did we hear today? What did we see today? Well, we had a little bit, and I reflected a little bit on how to be conduct safe environment, and be responsible coaches. Can't emphasize this enough. Certainly the importance of it. Please, well, you must take the NCCP safe sport module sooner rather than later. It's a no-brainer. It's not volleyball specific. It's not us specific. It's sport in general, and that is not just coaches. That's administrators. That's you know, office staff in Volleyball Canada. It's club administrators. It could even be parents, depending on the role they have with their team. It's a must. Again, it's actually a very good module. I found it very informative, and it really made me reflect a lot on my coaching values and roles and responsibilities. It's free, it's 90 minutes, and it's a small price to pay. This workshop really caters to the train to train LTD stage. You know, we talked about that, and the big takeaway and what I want to emphasize is this is a really cool, it's a really important stage as athletes are starting to get serious about their sport choices. I hope it's volleyball. I'm very selfish about that, and I think you are as well, because if they chose other sports, we wouldn't be having this workshop and we wouldn't be coaching. So athletes are starting to get as serious about volleyball. They're starting to feel it and decide what's in volleyball for them. So that doesn't mean they're going to be on the national team. It could be. They could get very competitive. But more importantly, they're starting to show hints and desires that they want to remain in volleyball for life. And that's really important. So we as coaches influencing this category certainly have a tremendous and cool opportunity to influence athletes. And please be aware of that. The other thing that creeps into this stage in this environment is winning. Winning is always there, but it starts to become a noticeable factor. And there's a lot of pressures, whether you put that on yourself, the athletes put it on you, parents put it on you, et cetera, et cetera. I hope administrators don't put it on you. But there is a really, really important balance, and winning is not the primary balance at this stage, but it certainly comes into play. We talked about volleyball cycles of action. You know, you saw the slides there. There is some good diagrams, certainly in the fundamentals of volleyball, but there will be good diagrams in your development workshop coach's workbook. So I apologize again if those slides weren't clear. We can certainly pick up on that if you don't have a good understanding of that. But I think it shouldn't be that hard. But the key concept and takeaway is we need to train every part of the cycle of action. So what are we doing with the ball? What are we doing without the ball? What are we doing when we're getting ready to have the ball? That kind of thing. And lastly, we spent time on defensive principles and systems, offensive principles and systems. So on the defensive side of things, it was emphasized quite a bit in this workshop. Keep the ball off the floor on our side of the net. That's the bottom line. Rules dictate some of the ways we can do it. You know, clean hits, etc., all parts of the body. I wouldn't train that way to use all parts of the body. Certainly clean hits, yeah. But one of the big ways to train and help prevent that and give us a fighting chance to win the rally or dig up the ball is with our ideal defensive position. I can't emphasize that enough. I've certainly had a lot of success myself with the teams I've coached by establishing that and making it appropriate for the league and environment and the athlete base that we have. So I'd encourage you to think about that as well before you just randomly adopt a system. Same thing goes for offensive principles and systems. So we talked about service reception, formations very briefly. We talked about the W system. We talked about the saucer system, very predominant systems in the younger ages. The saucer more so as you get more experienced and move up a little bit. And then the saucer remains around But what you start seeing is instead of 4 people forming part of the saucer, it might be a 3, potentially at very high levels, very high skilled athletes going to 2. We're not going to get there, certainly in this workshop. So we talked about those. Then we got into the specialization systems, the setting systems. We started with the 6-6. The takeaway from that is everybody does everything. There's no specialization. Great system to start out with. Again, using an example, I used that in my first tournament ever with the 13U, and one player came to me and said, "Coach, I can't set." And I said, "Well, when you get to position 2, you're going to set." "Well, I can't set." I said, "Well, then I'll leave you this option. You can play and you can set in position 2, or you can sit on the bench beside me, and I'm a very nice guy, so what would you like?" "I'll play." I said, "That's what I thought. I knew you could set." So you get away from the specialization is the moral of that story. Really, really like gold star emphasis 6-3 system. You're seeing a lot more of it. Obviously, we're emphasizing it in these workshops for all the right reasons. So please keep that in mind. And again, whatever offensive system you design, it should be age appropriate, it should be specialization appropriate, and the bottom line is keep the ball off your side of the court. But I really, really want to thank you on taking the time. I want to thank you on being part of this process. I want to thank you for being part of our pilot. These are important sessions. These are important things for you to reflect on and to grow and develop on your coaching journey. And I wish you nothing but success, and I look forward to our interaction. Take care.